Hello everybody, I'm Felicity Weeken and you've caught up with me at Ikage Primary School in Johannesburg, Alexandra. We'll be joining Mrs. Likalekala and her grade 4 maths class. You will see the RNC approach to teaching and learning in practice. The RNCS-based approach is outcomes-based. I hope you'll enjoy it as much as the learners will. Now, before we begin, remember that the critical outcomes for the RNCS overarch and underpin the entire learning experience. As you watch, be aware of what's happening in the classroom and see whether any or all of the critical outcomes have been incorporated into the lesson. Working together as members of a team or group, identifying and solving problems independently using creative and critical thinking, organizing and managing themselves and their activities responsibly and effectively, communicating effectively using a variety of strategies, using science and technology responsibly with an awareness of their impact on society and the environment, collecting, recording, analyzing, and critically examining information, as well as finding a use for that information, seeing the world as a set of related systems.
Today we are going to do something which you are not used to doing. I'm going to give you a number. In that number, you must work it so that you can get the very same number as your answer. We can use all the different signs that you have. That is addition, multiplication, division, and minus. The number that you are going to use is 497.
The purpose of this lesson is to assess whether the learners can use their skills and knowledge, in this case of the basic operations, in different situations. What they need to do here is see which numbers, when multiplied, added, divided, or subtracted, will bring them closest to the one on the chalkboard.
In order that you can find this number, you are going to use these small numbers. That is 3, 5, 7, 10, 12, and 15. You are going to work individually, not as a group, individually. Do you hear me? Yes. Individually. Ne? So I'm going to give you some papers. Lalelani. If awuzwanga kahle, le number le, angithi uzosebenzisa lama number lo lawa wonke ne, but ukuthi uthole le answer, angithi we are multiply, we are add, we are divide, we are subtract. Okay?
Why is it so important to give instructions clearly?
Instructions are important to learners because if you don't give clear instructions, they won't know how to do the activity. Instructions are very important to learners because they must know what they are supposed to do. Because if they don't understand, they won't be able to do the activity. Start working, but I'm going out of... From now onwards, we are going to work as groups. The number that we are going to use now is 87. And this 87, we are going to write it at the center of your page. Do you hear? At the center of your page. And the numbers that you are going to use are 2, 3, 5, 8, 12, 10, and 15. Learners, as you are working in your groups, I'll be coming round to see whether you are working together with other learners. Are you participating in your group? And I'll be looking at the different basic operations, that is addition, multiplication, division, and subtraction.
This was an assessment task. What makes it different from a test or exam in the old curriculum?
In the olden days, we used to take a memoranda and correct the children about that memoranda. We never took to consideration their method. We looked at the correct answer only. but this time we are able to see even those learners who are still struggling, and we are able to go back and help them to improve and be at the same level with others.
Okay.
Did you notice how the teacher gave instructions to the whole class and that each group was positioned to be able to see her while she was speaking? Notice also that she made sure the learners understood the task and also understood what she'd be looking for in her assessment.
Let me see. Where's the pages? Come on, Taba.
There is a hum of activity and busy noise coming from the classroom, a sure sign that the learners are engaged with the task and each other. They're working together and sharing information. Notice the difference, though, between this kind of noise and the disruptive noise that comes from learners that are bored and confused.
Plus 5. 83 plus 5.
I think you have all worked well in your groups. So I want each of a group must give us one person to come and show us their work with his paper on the hands.
At the beginning of this program, I reminded you to be aware of the critical outcomes during this activity. How many of the critical outcomes were evident during this lesson? When you planned this lesson, what was your expected outcomes?
The outcomes that were expected were that the learners must be able to communicate with each other. They must be able to work together. And they must be able to work with 4 different basic operations.
The highlighted critical outcomes were all being addressed in this lesson, as the task incorporated all these skills. When planning your own activities, check to see that the critical outcomes are being covered every time you plan a lesson, and make sure that all 7 of the critical outcomes are evenly included throughout your year's planning. This will ensure that your learners begin to acquire and use these skills and this knowledge from a young age. What makes this activity different from the lessons you've given in the past?
In the past, we used to tell learners what to do. We used to check only the answer that is correct. And we differentiated between when we were busy with addition, we never tackled multiplication or division. We only did multiplication, addition, subtraction in different ways.
I've heard a lot about maths needing to be based in real-life context, but this particular activity didn't seem to have any context. Why was that?
I think each lesson has life context in it, because as the learners are communicating, that means that they are going to communicate even outside the classroom, even in other learning areas, not in maths only.
Why are critical outcomes so important?
They're important because as we are now in democracy, we need those learners that are going to be able to think for themselves and think critically.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lekalekala. Mrs. Lekalekala has shown us why she chose that activity and how it conforms to the outcome-based approach to teaching and learning. But there are still some aspects of the RNCS that I don't understand. Dr. Mkwapenda is an expert on OBE, and he's going to fill us in on some of those aspects.
It is quite explicit in the new curriculum that the teacher needs to work along the set of learning outcomes that are presented and the assessment standards. And in some cases, some content is proposed that the teacher needs to guide the teacher in meeting the learning outcomes. The RNCS is a general statement about the curriculum. So the way the statement is presented, it takes into account all learning areas.
Some of the principles of the RNCS, for example, social justice, is not evident in this lesson. What do we actually mean by social justice in the context of the RNCS?
I think we need to understand that in the past there have been inequalities in the way that mathematics and other subjects are taught. And so we need to make sure that we have a curriculum that is inclusive, and so issues that bring learners from various backgrounds and being sensitive to the diversities of the learners that come to the classroom. So we need to attend to issues of social justice.
We haven't said much about the planning and preparation for teaching an outcomes-based classroom. What should teachers know and do when planning?
Teachers need to know their subject content knowledge, together with how they need to present the subject in the classroom. So planning needs to take into account what the subject is going to be about, what content, how to present the subject, and how to make sure that when the subject content is presented, how the teacher will need to gather evidence that the learners have understood what was being presented.
What do the assessment standards tell us? Is that what we should hope for or aim for?
The assessment standards stand for the minimum levels of achievement that the learners need to achieve. The way the curriculum is presented means that the teachers need to be aiming towards the achievement of those standards as they're teaching. So we are hoping that those minimum requirements can be achieved, but we need to understand that there are difficulties in actually achieving those minimum standards.
What happens to learners who go into the next grade without having achieved all of the minimum assessment standards?
Teachers need to recognize that they are working in a classroom that consists of learners who are at different levels. And so in the planning, in the teaching, the issue of the level of individual learners' competence needs to be worked with by the teachers.
I think that if this activity has shown me anything today, it is that the RNCS principles can be applied in any classroom situation and should be smoothly integrated into each teaching and learning activity. The learners and educator will all enjoy the challenges of an OBE classroom and each feel a sense of achievement at the end.